From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's great to be back with you. I'm looking forward to another fun episode.
Oh, it's great to be back, Steve. And yeah, we got a good one lined up, I feel. And first off, how are things with you?
Good, good. Thanks for asking. How about with you?
Uh, doing well, doing well. Just keeping my head above water.
Absolutely. Well, this one kind of came from your mailbag, if you will. It's a topic that you were experiencing and we were talking about, and I think it's one that's relatable to our audience in several ways. And I don't think we talk enough about it, but it's how do we plan for success in projects in AV and specifically programming, of course. But there's so many different aspects that go into making a program work and making a system function successfully. And there's a lot that people don't really think about, or they think are other people's responsibilities. So why don't you share a little bit without getting into the specifics about what brought us to this topic?
Oh yeah, thank you, Steve. So what brought us to this topic, as you know, I'm currently in charge of a building here that we are, tackling. So we're undertaking a project right now of verifying that all our AV equipment is, configured correctly. This including, the configurations on it, the programming, the IP addressing, the VLAN that's on, security settings. So it's a big undertaking project, and it's got me thinking, and that's what it brought up is like how important is to build this prior instead of going, okay, your building's been open for a year now, let's figure all this out.
Absolutely. And part of that is the gotchas and the issues that you're running into that probably could have been avoided had some of these things been discussed in advance. Now, is this something that you would expect a service provider to reach out and ask you and give you almost a questionnaire or a client that says, this is the information we need from you? Is this more something, let's sit down and talk about our project and how we plan to approach it? Is it a collaborative thing? Like what from your perspective you think would?
I would say it's a partnership, but I'm me personally, I'm someone who gets heavily involved. Because I feel I'm a very detail-oriented person. I like to have information and be detailed and make sure things go a certain way. I know not everyone's that way. I'm not saying my way is the right way. My ways could be the wrong way. It just that's how I function. So I do tend to get involved, and I like a partnership where if someone else is, doing the work, it's so that we're on the same team. It's not like, oh, I'm just the lonely old client and I'm telling you this and you're going to dismiss my concerns or my suggestions and do whatever you want to do anyway. I've seen that on too many projects. I'm sure our listeners have dealt with that as well on way too many projects. Things like that annoys me because then you always find yourself going back and cleaning up. I don't like going back and cleaning up. And it's funny enough, I actually had this conversation with my team this week is I know everyone talking about done and done. And because done is, oh, you still got to do the documentation, you still got to do your code repository, like all this other, the veggies, the meat. And I'm like, that should be underdone. When you're done the project, you're 100% done. All your documentation, all your coding, all your repository, everything's done. So I'm trying to get my team to move away from done to just done. So that's how I look at things is if we have to go back and revisit space after equipment was installed just because it wasn't configured correctly or IP addresses were wrong or some other weird is it that's taking a lot of resources away from doing other things.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of times too, if I'm going to look at it from an outsider's perspective, from a service provider, they don't always know what is the issue that that they may run into, because they don't, because every client is different, every situation is different, and we don't want it to fall in that trap of putting systems in a bubble, because what could work in the shop, what could work on paper, it has to work in the real environment. So I think that there's those conditions need to be brought forward, but sometimes they may not always know the right questions to ask. So it, and I guess it depends on who you're working with, how much they know to be able to uh, have input, or how much they need to be prompted for input.
Okay, I guess that would really fall under the role of a project manager,
Yeah.
to kind of wrangle all that, as saying, like wrangling the cats, for a project manager. So it may be out of the scope of a programmer, but still, that's where our voices need to come in, and we need to make sure that we're getting the information we need to do, that we can be successful on our programming side, that we have the either the right IP address, or the right host name, if we're doing host name of devices, making sure that if there's security settings, that you're setting those in the code, either password or however, so your communications are working, like. And also, with that information, we have to share it with everyone else. So if, say, like, we sit there and program saying, okay, the IP address of this device is this, and we do that in the code, and then IT comes like, oh, wait, we got to do an IP, we got to change our schema on the IP, not knowing the program is already programming all these IPs in their code. There's a miscommunication there. Yes, project manager should be correlating all that, but sometimes that's not a question they know to ask. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. So what may be some, good general rule of thumb or a best practice that we could share, or might be good to think about, is it um, when we're talking about devices on the network, which is almost every system nowadays, let's make sure that that information either gets shared or gets discussed in a meeting that says, okay, how are we going to handle your network? But I think, to your point, the programmer needs to raise their hand, and they need to question. I have some pieces of equipment that require secure connections, or I require more bandwidth, or it requires more ports being open. Let's make sure that we have a meeting with the right people to discuss this.
Oh yeah, definitely. You got to have those meetings. Yeah, and during those meetings, you have to have the right people in, the right stakeholders. In my experience, in 15 years of doing this, it always seems that we never always have the right people in every meeting, and that's when we run into issues. Because things are overlooked or assumed. That's the worst you can do on a project, is assume something and be like, well, we're going to do it this way, when really the boots on the ground are doing it a different way.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst thing that we could do is
Yep.
is not ask questions, not bring something up, and not make sure that it does get talked about, at least. Or I think it's critical that we make sure that at least goes on record that we've asked for this information, so that it doesn't come back to bite us in the end.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Well, I think that unless there's final thoughts on that, I'd challenge the audience to give us their thoughts about you know how they handle these situations, because it's certainly a common occurrence. I think it's what makes what we do special, because we are are always working on projects that are going to be used in environments that are not necessarily owned by us these days, in terms of the fact that they have to live on a network, and they also have to be something that a client is ready to maintain and be able to handle.
So yeah, the only thing I would say is the making sure you document a central location or area for your information. My big pet peeve is static IPs. I do not like static IPs. I understand when we write code and we're talking to a device via IP, we can't have that device change. That's why DHCP reservation is very key. Because then you can throw the host name into your DHCP server too, and then you actually know where the devices are. And if I have to swap out a device, I know what IP address actually give it. All I have to do is throw the MAC address in, plug it in, make sure it's DHCP, and we're good to go. I don't have to look at tons of spreadsheet, making sure we don't have duplicate IPs because the server will handle all that very easily. That's my closing thoughts on that. You have any, Steve?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said is really important, and it's something that is going to vary. It's not everybody's going to be the same, and not everybody's going to have the same uh, either way of doing things or preference. So that's why I think asking those questions, and I wanted to key in on what you said about keeping the information centrally located, because I think that's critical. Is maybe, if a programmer can put together, these are all the products that we're working with that we need to put on the network, and these are some of the requirements of them, that will help stimulate the conversation. But I am curious. I'm sure that others have ways of doing this, and if anybody's willing to share something that they have known to work, I think that would be a big value.
Agree.
So wrapping that up, how can people get in touch with you, continue this conversation, and learn more about what you're up to?
You can always Google me. You'll find me out there. Anything with HEPMA on X at AV_James King. LinkedIn, I'm a little more active on there now, but still not as much as I'm on X. So again, Google me. You'll find me.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And we definitely want to hear from you. We definitely want to be covering the topics that you're looking to hear more about and answer your questions. So please reach out to us and let us know what you think. And we're curious about your feedback on this and other episodes. So please share that, and that'll help us to ensure that the future content is on target and serving your needs. So please continue to be in touch with us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.